Constituent Congress of Peru 1822. The Constituent Congress of Peru 1822 was the first democratically elected institution in Peru. Its members, called deputies, were appointed by popular election called by the liberator José de San Martín, who then exercised power as Protector of Peru. The main task of this meeting was to give the Republic of Peru its first constitution, which was the Liberal Constitution of 1823. Also, before the retirement of San Martín, presented the executive to 3 members, who formed a collegial body called the Supreme Governing Board, and whose head was General José de la Mar. Subsequently ratified in succession to the former presidents of the Republic of Peru, José de la Riva Agüero, and José Bernardo de Tagle, better known as the Marquis of Torre Tagle. Background. After the proclamation of the independence of Peru, the ancient capital of the Viceroyalty of Peru, Lima, on July 28, 1821, General José de San Martín assumed command of the military political free departments of Peru under the title Protector, according to the decree of August 3, 1821. San Martín was the one who gave the state its first Peruvian flag, anthem, currency, and its administration, and its first primitive institutions. But it remained to give a constitution, and meanwhile, a temporary regulation was imposed, later replaced by a statute. On December 27, 1821, San Martín called for the first time the people to choose freely a constituent congress, with the mission to establish the form of government that henceforth would govern Peru, and a proper constitution. Installation. On September 20, 1822 was installed the first Constituent Congress of Peru, composed of 79 deputies elected and 38 alternates for realistic territories. Its members had the most prominent members of the clergy, the forum, letters, and sciences. Before this Congress, San Martín resigned the protectorate and joined to leave Peru. For the preparatory meetings, the Congress elected Toribio Rodriguez de Mendoza, the precursor of independence, the same who had been rector of Convictorio of San Carlos, where he trained in the philosophy of enlightenment to the generation of independence. Much of his former students now were included as deputies. President of the Congress was the elected deputy from Arequipa Francisco Xavier de Luna Pizarro, and secretaries José Faustino Sánchez Carrion, author of the famous Letters of El Perro, which called for the Federal Republic form of government, and Francisco Javier Mariaqui, also a liberal. Appointment of the Governing Board. Lawmakers began to deliver the executive to a group of 3 members, who formed a collegial body called the Supreme Governing Board, chaired by José de la Mar, and including Manuel Salazar and Antonio Alvarado and Felipe Baquijano. The board took office on September 21, 1822. On November 4, Congress agreed thanksgiving to Lord Thomas Cochrane, Colombia, the Liberation Army, Chile, and the Supreme Director, and expressed its appreciation to the indigenous guerrillas and even the natural forest for their services in favor of independence. It also gave broad amnesty, even to the Spanish. The only exception was the former minister Bernardo de Monteagudo, who was banned, establishing penalties for authorities to allow him to live freely in their districts. On November 22, Congress gave the coup de grace to the monarchical illusion. San Martín overruled the commission of Juan Garcia del Rio and James Parisian, who had been sent to Europe to find a king for Peru, and on 22 December of that year, the Congress established the basis of the Constitution, which, among the many reforms, stresses the abolition of the trade in Negroes. The meeting was also devoted to the organization of the country into departments, provinces, and districts. Political and military crisis. The main task of the legislators, that is, drafting the first constitution of independent Peru and legislative work was hampered by the difficult circumstances that arose in late 1822 and early 1823. There were no resources to pay salaries to military and civilian employees, and around the capital were ravaged by bandits. As for the war against the Spanish who still held out in southern Peru, the governing board decided to conduct the military plan of San Martin to attack the royalists from south intermediate ports. But it needed outside military help. Indeed, it was already underway to support the northern liberator. During the Guayaquil Conference, Bolivar, San Martin had offered military aid to Peru, which was founded in July 1822, with the dispatch of Colombian troops under the command of Juan Paz del Castillo. In September of that year, Bolivar returned to offer another 4,000 troops, but the brand new governing board accepted the reception of only 4,000 rifles. Relations between Peru and Gran Colombia entered its most critical point due to the annexation of Guayaquil to Gran Colombiano territory. Added to that were the instructions he had received from Juan Paz del Castillo not to commit their forces in case they were guaranteed success only in northern Peru. He soon came into conflict with the interests of Peru and Colombia, and returned home in January 1823. Relations with Gran Colombia cooled, then, at the very moment when the campaign was being waged intermediate. This expedition ended in failure after the defeat of the Patriot Army in Torata and Moquegua 19 and 21 January 1823. From then dates the lettre la burlesque to the Spanish Congress that spread from their camp situated a short distance from Lima. Congress and the governing board were so terribly discredited in public opinion. The patriotic officers commanding the troops that guarded Lima, fearing a Spanish offensive, signed a petition to Congress, dated February 23, 1823 in Miraflores, invoking the name of one supreme head to order and be quickly obeyed, replacing the collegial body that belonged to the board, even suggested the name of the officer to assume the government stated, Colonel José de la Riva Agüero y Sánchez Baquit. The crisis deepened when another petition to Congress was presented by the civic militia stationed in Bellavista and a third headed by Mariano Tramaria. On February 27, troops moved from their quarters to the estate of Balconcello, half a league from Lima, where they demanded the dismissal of the board. These rebels were led by General Andrés de Santa Cruz. It was the first coup in the Republican history of Peru, known as the Balconcello Mutiny. Given the pressure that day, Congress agreed to dismiss the governing board, and an interim order to the highest ranking military leader was José Bernardo de Tagle. On February 28, Congress ordered to release to General José de la Mar, who had been arrested at his home, citing General Andrés de Santa Cruz, who made an oral presentation of the position of the heads, and concluded that Congress obeyed the order, but if not named José de la Riva Agüero as president, he and military leaders would resign and would leave the country. Given the statement made by Santa Cruz, Congress named Riva Agüero as president by 39 votes for a total of 60, not assigned duties and deadlines. Previously, Riva Agüero was promoted to the rank of Grand Marshal. Such events divided Congress. Some members felt that he had exerted pressure on the so-called Sovereign Congress, which was inadmissible, and many of them did not return to session. The Congress president, Francisco Xavier de Luna Pizarro, exiled himself in protest. From that time began to coexist two major factions, the realistic or Spanish and separatist or patriot. The separatist or patriot was divided initially into republicans and monarchists. The latter, being discarded, was divided into parliamentary and liberal caudillo. Riva Agüero thus became the first president of the Peruvian Republic, though elected de facto. This person would conclude without foreign aid the War of Independence of Peru, which organized the Second Intermediate Campaign, which, like the first, ended in failure. Discord soon broke out between Congress and Riva Agüero. Congress ruled that Trujillo be moved to the executive and legislative branches, also created a military power confided to Venezuelan General Antonio José de Sucre, who had arrived in Peru in May of that year, and sent a delegation to Colombia to request personal collaboration of Simón Bolívar in the war against the Spanish June 19, 1823. Next, Congress granted the same powers Sucre equal to those of President for the duration of the crisis, and on June 23 ruled that remain exempt from Riva Agüero Supreme Command. Riva Agüero did not comply with that provision, and Trujillo sailed with part of the authorities. He kept his inauguration as president, ordered the dissolution of Congress July 19, created a Senate of 10 members and organized troops. While in Lima, Congress was again called by the provisional president José Bernardo de Tagle, the August 6, 1823. The Congress recognized Tagle as president of the Republic. In the midst of this grave crisis, in which two presidents vied for power, Tagle Constitution promulgated on 12 November 1823. Soon after, Riva Agüero was arrested and deported, unifying control of the country and around Bolívar, while Tagle was reduced to figurehead. The Constitution of 1823. The main work of the Constituent Congress was undoubtedly drafting the first constitution of independent Peru, which was liberal inspiration. The first step was the development of the basis of the Constitution at the hands of a congressional committee, composed of the deputies Justo Figueroa, Francisco Xavier de Luna Pizarro, José Joaquín de Olmedo, Manuel Pérez de Tudela, and Hipólito Unanue. These bases were issued by the governing board on December 17, 1822, consisted of 24 items, which broadly stated that all the provinces of Peru gathered in one body formed the Peruvian nation, that from then be called Republic of Peru, also stated that sovereignty resided in the nation, and is independent of the Spanish monarchy and any other foreign domination would be the Catholic religion to the exclusion of any other, and as for the national power, would be discussed. The Constitution was approved and promulgated by President Torre Tagle, the November 12, 1823. But a day earlier, the Congress ordered the suspension of his articles that were inconsistent with the powers granted to the liberator Bolívar, who was already underway to establish the dictatorship. In practice, it was in effect for the duration of the Bolivarian regime. After some years, was restored on June 11, 1827 by Congress, after the fall meeting of the Bolivarian regime or for life. The vice president and Baquijano Manuel Salazar, head of the executive, was sent to fulfill the 16 June of that year. Force until March 18, 1828, being replaced by the liberal Constitution of 1828. Presidents: Toribio Rodriguez de Mendoza, President of the Preparatory Meetings 1822. Francisco Xavier de Luna Pizarro, First President September 20, 1822. José de Laria y Lordo, October 21, 1822. Juan Antonio de Anduza, November 21, 1822. Hipólito Unanue. Nicolas Aranibar. Carlos Pedimont y Talavera. Justo Figueroa. Manuel Arias. Manuel Salazar y Baquijano. José de la Mar. Felipe Antonio Alvarado. José María Galdiano. José Gregorio Pérez.